Powers 2. The Cult of Warp by Rob Harper.
Warp stumbles to the ground as if hit by some invisible weapon. Otis and Professor Wildebeest rush to his aid, but he's already recovering.
It's okay. I'm fine. Whatever it was seemed to have passed. It was like a psychic attack. It had something to do with Sin, but it's all so foggy. I know it wasn't her, but rather someone else trying to reach out to me, and then nothing.
Warp looks concerned, but his countenance returns to its normal solemn state, as he realizes he has to put this attack behind him, and go and confront his granddaughter in her own sanctum sanctorum.
Are you sure you're all right?
I'll be fine, Wildebeest. Please, let us get this over with.
Well, we were just coming to get you. Before Otis transports you to Mount Wonder, I want you to take this.
Wildebeest hands Warp a small bracelet.
It's a tracking device and rescue beacon, so that if anything goes wrong, the cavalry can be right behind you.
Warp takes the device without a word and puts it around his wrist.
I've prepared a spell to get you to Mount Wonder. It should be easy enough since we have detailed layouts of the Evolver's base.
I'm sure the trip will be fine, child. It's what's waiting for me on the other end that I find most disturbing.
Warp smiles at the Otis, trying to reassure her. The three step into a large room that seems to be used as a travel point quite often, if the glyphs on the floor and ceiling are to be interpreted correctly. Waiting for them there is the Claw.
Whatever happens, Warp, we'll be there to back you up, and you have my word on it.
The Claw nods and offers his hand to Warp, who takes it. Warp silently walks into the center of the circle of glyphs. Otis chants a spell to send him to Mount Wonder and his destined reunion. Warp suddenly finds himself in the Mount Wonder base, scene of many a great battle, and more recently home to what seems to be an army, but now it lies quiet and empty. Signs point to a recent evacuation or deployment. Warp looks around thinking that it may be already too late, and then he hears a voice calling his name. Since he has no other recourse, he follows the voice and finds himself in a large command room with a huge window overlooking the surrounding mountaintops. Off to one side is a smallish Weasley man. Warp eyes him, knowing that it wasn't him who called him here.
His name is Rook, and he's waiting to take me to my victory. You, Grandfather, are the last man I expected to show up here.
Sin steps from the shadows, eyeing the man that can be no other than her grandfather, Warp.
Sin, my, how you've grown. When I last saw you, you were merely a small child. And now here you are, a supervillain in the making.
Warp tries to see some good in his grandchild, but unfortunately he realizes that he indeed may be too late.
If my army was here to see you, they'd call it the Second Coming, a sign that we are indeed on the right track to completing your dream. I myself, on the other hand, can see more clearly. You aren't here to join me, or even succeed me, but rather you've come to stop me, haven't you? How times have changed, eh, Grandfather? From villain to dead to superhero, it doesn't suit you, you know.
I've come to try and save you from yourself, Sin.
Save me? Once I take the Power Mist and reclaim my birthright, old man, it'll be you who needs saving.
The Power Mist. That is what this is all about with the first family, then? You found the mist?
The situation is more dire than just his granddaughter with dreams of despotism.
Yes, I've found it, and once I let the mist change me, nothing will be able to stop me. I'll finally have all the power that my heritage, your heritage, should have given me from birth, and that which my parents so blindly decided not to give me when it was my time.
Your parents wanted to spare you their own lives. Powers had only ruined their marriage and every relationship they'd ever been in. And in the end, it was their powers and responsibility that took them away from you. Can't you see they were just trying to do what they thought was best for you?
Warp pleads with Sin, knowing deep down inside too much has happened for words to stop her now.
Your words are wasted, Grandfather. It's too late.
Sin takes the container holding what is left of the Power Mist and opens it.
No.
Inhaling deeply, Sin is irreparably changed instantly. She grows taller, and her appearance becomes more sharp, and in some indescribable way, evil. Sin laughs as she fires what looks like magic bolts from her left hand and pyro waves from her right hand. She turns her awesome power towards her grandfather, and he's flung against a distant wall. Warp's last sight is of Sin walking towards him. Warp's last action, however, takes place a few seconds later, as he activates Wildebeest's rescue beacon. He doesn't think all the beta in the world would be able to stop her, but they have to try. He then falls roughly into unconsciousness.
Chapter 4.
The Claw jumps up from his seat in front of the communication rig the moment the signal comes through from Warp.
People, we've got a signal. Mount up. It looks like Warp needs our help after all.
He yells into the intercom, summoning all the beta at Wildebeest to the ready room. Otis teleports in, and Professor Wildebeest, the Truth, Portal, Thrust, and Congo Knight run in the door a few seconds later.
Okay, Otis, get ready to repeat that teleportation spell. We've got a rescue mission here, and let's get prepared.
The Claw seems more in control than usual, and is actually taking command, rather than just following Otis's lead.
I will be staying to keep an eye on things here. Of course, Truth. We wouldn't want you to get your hands dirty.
The Claw always resented the Truth's lack of guts when it came to fighting, but right now he's really ticking him off. He isn't even willing to fight to save his own grandfather. Taking a hint at the Claw's mood and glare, the Truth leaves the room to let the team prepare.
You're staying too, Professor. We can't have anything happen to you. This place would fall apart.
Otis makes sure that the aging hero does what's best for the school. Wildebeest would have argued with her maybe 5 years ago, but now he knows that his adventuring days are over. It's time for the new beta to move on without him getting in the way. The professor's deep thoughts are interrupted by an incoming transmission. The Claw hits the answer button and is confronted by the visage of Doc Rock, leader of the group calling themselves the Rockers, and he looks like hell.
What the hell do you want? We're busy.
The Claw has no love lost for these former beta, especially his wild half-brother Bully, who's a member of the team.
Benjamin, settle down. I would think that after the Masters of Violence incident, you would be more open to Doc Rock and his team.
Wildebeest owed Doc Rock for helping rescue Otis and Portal off a MLV helicarrier a few months before.
What can we do for you, Doc Rock?
We got huge problems here in the city, Professor. A bunch of those powers wearing the livery of those wacko followers of Warp are attacking our island. We never imagined there were so many of them. We've got the first family fighting in Middle Park against them, but I don't think they can hold up much longer. My rockers are fighting us street-to-street battles. I even called in a few favors with Virtue and our sewer urgents. They're helping out. Hell, I think I even saw Captain Courage flying around. I don't think he's enough. We need your help now.
Doc Rock isn't really asking, because he knows that Wildebeest will come. He just wants to stress how bad it is.
We'll be there as soon as we can.
Thanks, Professor. I just hope you guys get here in time, and hope you'll be enough. Doc Rock, out.
Professor, we can't just go and leave Warp to rot.
The Claw has come full circle in his feelings about his father's old enemy.
You're right, Claw. I promised Magnus help, and I'll send it. But we can only spare Otis and yourself. Go get Warp and bring him to the city. I think he might be the only one who can stop this army. Congo Knight and Thrust, you two go get as many of the students old enough to help. We'll need everyone in the city. Let's get going.
Wildebeest thinks as his team goes off in separate directions that he isn't quite done being a hero, once more into the breach. Professor Henry Wildebeest smiles as he goes off to prepare the Wild Plane to go to war. Otis and the Claw arrive in the room that is used quite often by the Otis to teleport long distances. Her own abilities are limited to a few miles at most. The thought of just her and her lover going into the veritable belly of the beast to rescue a man who was once their parents' worst enemy doesn't appeal much to her, but she does what she has to do, and right now, they are the city's best hope for survival. She looks deep into the Claw's eyes and kisses him. Neither of them say anything. They've done this enough times to know that either of them might not come back from this mission. Otis, using the rescue beacon Warp has on him as a fix, chants her spell, and both she and the Claw suddenly find themselves halfway around the world. The Claw immediately goes into combat mode as he gets into a stance ready to fight and defend the woman he loves at any cost. The large command room they are in seems empty at first, but they hear a moan and realize they aren't quite alone. Crumpled in the corner where Sin left him is Warp. He is worse for wear and barely conscious.
You must go. She is too strong. She will kill you both.
Warp's words are interrupted by Sin as she returns with Rook, never far behind.
Ah, grandfather, you flatter me. And look, they only sent 2 to rescue you. Boy, the beta must really hold a grudge.
Sin laughs at the Claw and Otis. The Claw never takes the taunting well, and he leaps at Sin's throat, his claw ready to slice. Sin catches him midair with a magic bolt, and he flies off much like Warp did. The Claw lands next to Warp and groans.
Oh!
Realizing that Sin is too much for them, Otis quickly chants a return spell, and the three find themselves back in Wildebeest's foundation. There is no time for a quick stopover, as Otis quickly casts another spell to get to the city as fast as she can before the other teams fall to Sin's army. She teleports to the only place she knows perfectly, the observation deck of the Domain State Building. The Claw regains his wits a bit and stands up. He then helps Warp to his feet.
Thank you for rescuing me. But is now the best time to sightsee?
Look around, Warp, and you'll see why.
Warp scans the city laid out before him, and he sees nothing but superpowered beings battling. In the distance, he can see Middle Park on fire, and overhead, beings imbued with flight war across the heavens.
Down there are the Beta, the Rockers, the First Family, sewer urchins, and countless other superheroes battling an army. And that army fights in your name. You have to stop them.
Otis knows there's no time to waste. Even now her teammates, her friends, might be dying, not to mention the millions of innocent people in the city. Behind them, Sin steps out of Rook's portal.
Well, well, fancy meeting you here. Great minds think alike. I too thought this would provide me with a perfect view of my victory. I was thinking of renaming it Sin Island once it's completely mine. What do you think?
Sin feels all-powerful, and with good reason. The Claw leaps at her again, with similar results. She blasts her attacker over the edge of the building.
No!
That boy doesn't learn, does he?
Sin laughs more as Warp and Otis fire their own powerful blasts at their enemy. Warp using waves of power, and Otis using magical bolts. Sin parries the attack with her own magical bolts versus Otis, and her own power versus Warp. The three square off, and it soon becomes apparent that Sin is very much in control. Both Otis and Warp begin to be pushed back towards the edge of the building. If either let up, Sin's blast will surely be the end of them. The strain is enormous, and even below the huge light display is catching everyone's attention. Sin knows that she is unbeatable. Her laugh is cut short, however. Sin looks down at her chest to see a claw sticking out of it. In her ear, the Claw whispers.
That is what a flat scan can do. You were so worried about getting powers. No, as you die, that a man without powers was the one who beat you.
The Claw withdraws his weapon, and Sin falls to the ground mortally wounded. Otis runs up to the Claw crying.
I thought you were dead.
She hugs and kisses him.
We wolves are a hard breed to kill.
The Claw smiles and kisses the woman he wants to spend the rest of his life with. Meanwhile, Warp cradles the dying body of Sin. His tears streak down his face as he remembers all those he had held before like this. As he feels his granddaughter slip away, he can't help but wonder if he was brought back to feel this pain as a sort of punishment. Sin reaches up to the face of her grandfather she never got a chance to know.
Wish it had been different. I'm so sorry.
And with that, Sin dies. Otis and the Claw look over the scene with grief in their own hearts.
Warp, I'm so sorry.
The Claw feels like he gutted Warp as much as Sin.
No, Claw. You did what you had to do. Only now may she find peace that life didn't afford her.
Warp gently puts down Sin's body and stands up.
Now it's up to me to stop any more bloodshed this day.
He suddenly regains his regal composure that made him the man to be feared all those years ago. From the air he draws particles, making a new uniform for himself, an all-black version of his old armor. It makes him look even more menacing, and yet Otis and the Claw know that it is a sign of the pain he feels inside. Upwards he floats, ready to make the most important speech he has ever made.
Otis, could you cast something to make my words heard to all those fighting in my name?
Otis nods and casts a spell allowing everyone to hear his words all over the city. Upwards he floats, with a purple halo of energy pulsing around him.
Hear me, for I am Warp.
His words ring in everyone's ears. All combatants cease instantly. Many of Sin's minions, being followers of the cult of Warp, drop to their knees at the sight of their god reborn.
Hear me, and cease this battle. You, my followers, were misled. Sin wanted nothing but power. She didn't understand my message. I have died and come back, and what I have learned is that war is not the answer. I tried to live peacefully in my African compound, but that was not the answer either. We powers cannot rule humans. We do not have the right to subjugate anyone. No one has the right. I have lived through the horrors of Nazi Germany, and that is a lesson we must not forget.
A hush falls on the followers of Warp, and even some of the other heroes come to help defend the city start to believe they are witnessing a second coming.
I have learned that war is not the answer, and I've also learned that separating ourselves is a dead end also. In my African compound, we tried to live in a hate-free society, but all we ended up with was a threat to other nations, and we were destroyed for it. So you may be asking, what is the answer? The answer is simply peace. We all must learn to live in peace amongst each other, both power and human. Only then will we find true understanding, As powers, we have an obligation to use our abilities to improve society, not to rule over it, nor should we be slaves. True equality is the only way, and only by embracing each other can we live happily ever after. So that is my message I wish to give. Hear me, for I am Warp. Live among society, and help where you can. Now disperse.
With that, Warp creates a large flash of energy, and suddenly the sky is empty. The war is over. The followers of Warp disperse as their god told them to do. A new message is to be spread to everyone. A new religion is born. Warp flies down to where Wildebeest and Doc Rock with their respective teams are waiting. There is much rebuilding to do, but for now, they can thank the man that averted a total power civil war, with the city as the battleground.
That was very good, Magnus. You'll make a worthy god.
Wildebeest shakes Warp's hand.
I assure you, Henry, that I do not intend to be anyone's god. Power corrupts. It would only be so long before I was corrupted too.
Warp smiles, and yet there is sadness behind it. Otis and the Claw teleport onto the scene, and Otis hugs Warp. The Claw extends his hand.
Thank you, Magnus.
The Claw is a man of little words, but they are enough, and Warp knows that all is forgiven between them. The rest of the super teams take their turns thanking and gawking at the living legend, until finally he says he has to go.
You know, you are always welcome to stay at the Foundation. It was your home once. It can be again. We always need good teachers.
I thank you, Henry, but I think I need to go and rediscover the world, and my place in it. But don't worry, you haven't seen the last of me, Beta.
I never thought I'd hear that from you, Warp, and be looking forward to our next meeting.
Wildebeest smiles, and Warp smiles back as he launches himself off. The Beta get to work repairing the city, knowing that in Warp, they have a new powerful ally against whatever evil comes their way next. Rook steps out of the shadows and looks over what should have been a great victory. Seeing the Beta happy annoys him. A sinister look falls upon his face.
It's hard to find good despots these days. Oh, how I miss the old days. Now whom will I use next?
With that, Rook creates a dimensional portal and leaves the city for parts unknown. As he enters the portal, his looks distort, revealing his taller, shadow form, and his eyes burn a bright red.
Epilogue.
After a few exhausting days repairing the city, most of the Beta finally return home. They disperse to sleep or shower, and eventually the Claw is left alone to contemplate the last few days. He sits on the front lawn of the school listening to nothing in particular. Students rush around him to hear from their older friends what happened in the city. Many a wonderful and tall tale is spun around the epic so-called Power Civil War. Behind him, the Claw is suddenly aware of a presence. He spins around to find Warp's dogs, Enki and Enlil, standing there looking confused. In all the chaos, he had forgotten that two Mastiffs were here.
It looks like you're orphans now, too. I guess we orphans will have to stick together.
The Claw hugs the two dogs, and they lick him back, accepting their new master.
Let's go for a jog. I need to let off some steam.
The Claw darts off into the forest path surrounding the Foundation, and Enki and Enlil are close behind, barking and carrying on. From the shadows of the woods, a set of evil eyes watch the three new friends run. The eyes quickly become 2 sets, then 3, and so on until there are 15 sets of evil wolf-like eyes watching the joggers. Then in a growling chorus, the beast behind the eyes speaks.
Soon, Beta. Very soon.
The end. For now.
Hey, Jack!
Yes, Rob.
Ah, glad I caught you.
So am I.
Don't be so excited then. I just want to ask you a question. That's all.
And what would that question be?
So, if someone wanted to support Vinland Old Time Radio, that's a wonderful podcast, how would they go about doing so?
I would hope that they'd go online and purchase some apparel. That would the proceeds hopefully go to us and help us produce these fine radio shows that we are doing out of the kindness of our hearts for the enjoyment of the general populace. Is that something you had in mind?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. There's a place they can go. It's called cafepress.com/Vinland Old Time Radio. Have you checked that out?
I have not. They do sound like some trustworthy folks. Please do tell.
Very trustworthy, yes, quite. They do sell T-shirts, but they also have other accoutrements, such as glasses and not stemware. I was going to say stemware, but no, not stemware. Glasses and mugs, thermoses.
Let me get this straight. That snazzy T-shirt that you are wearing,
Yes, good, yes.
at this very moment, is something that you have purchased from Cafe Press?
I know, it looks like it would cost millions.
I assume so.
At least hundreds to have a Vinland old-time radio shirt. But no, it's not. It's reasonably priced.
Excellent. And of fine quality. I'm feeling the stitching now. Excellent.
Yeah, stop feeling my shirt. Yes, it's quite fine quality. They are wonderful quality. CafePress.com/Vinland Old Time Radio. Support your favorite podcast, because I know it is. Because it's our favorite podcast.
It is mine, but I'm an egocentric maniac.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye. No, I mean that B-U-I, not B-Y. We're still here. I'm not leaving yet. Are we leaving now?